All right, we got a new video. It's a new creator. I haven't watched any of his stuff before, but he has a point to be made, and it's that Baldur's Gate 3 proves that modern gaming is worse than it's ever been. And because of that, Western devs are attacking Larian Studios. I don't know. We'll get into the points, and I think he might be right on a couple issues, but I don't think gaming is worse than it's ever been. It's just in a spot where it's very odd, and people need to make changes to fix certain aspects of how they approach it.
And as you're probably aware, the hotly anticipated Baldur's Gate 3 has finally come out on PC, with the console versions releasing in September for us peasants such as myself. The game has been a massive success story for Larian Studios, who has had one hell of a comeback the past decade with the Divinity Original Sin games, which I beat both of them, and yeah, I highly recommend them. Players are praising Baldur's Gate 3 due to its breadth of content, incredible branching paths of story, and character customization, to name just a few of the highlights of this landmark title. And its Metacritic and user score are...
The big thing about all of that is the game came out, it's gamer focused, it has a complete experience, there's no microtransactions at all. So like, when you buy the game, you get the game as it's intended to be played, and it plays well. That's not a high bar to hit, if I'm going to be honest. And I think a lot of studios are missing that fairly low bar of, when I buy the game, I want the whole game. I want a complete story and experience. And I want it to play well. I don't want to be your beta tester. There's three fairly easy, achievable standards. And anything they add to that is better or worse to a certain degree, because you can add microtransactions, but if it doesn't affect the gameplay, they're not going to care. People don't care. But that's what Baldur's Gate 3 has seemed to deliver to its audience and fans, is the fact that you get the whole game experience just by buying the game, instead of having to buy other little tack-ons.
Are not only surprising, but insanely weird. With this game being one of the only big releases in years that I can think of anyway that has gotten this glowing of a reception. In a lot of ways, Baldur's Gate 3's success is to CRPGs what Elden Ring was to action open world RPGs. Sadly, both Elden Ring and BD3 have a striking similarity among...
He says it's the only game in years, but realistically, New Zelda did pretty good. Elden Ring did pretty good. Diablo 4 did really good for about 2 weeks, and then people started getting towards the mid and end game. It kind of started to unravel. But, like, initial reception was really good for Diablo 4, and then people started noticing the mid to late game problems with it, and then patches and everything went off the rails. But the point is, like, games have been well received in the past couple years. It's just they end up shooting themselves in the foot or falling off pretty quickly, and that's just kind of the cycle of modern gaming, right?
Amongst them as well. And it's not that they're both incredibly well made, offer loads of options, and have zero microtransactions, but that Baldur's Gate 3, like Elden Ring before it, over-delivers on its promise, and this has worried and pissed off many developers at other gaming studios. When Elden Ring released, we had Horizon Zero Dawn and Ubisoft employees
over-delivers is... That's a funny thing, like... And that is all, like, marketing and expectation management, right? Because if you have a product and you try to undersell it, because realistically, Baldur's Gate did not do heavy advertising in a huge amount of promises. They kept it very kind of low key to a certain degree, which makes it easier to meet expectations and exceed. So I think that a lot of game companies try to overhype their game and then fall a little short, whereas Baldur's Gate said that this is what the game is and gave like a baseline experience, and that allowed the viewer or player to exceed that expectation because it did have more than just the base level experience in the game. So that's a lot of like marketing and management of expectations that Baldur's Gate handled extremely well by not trying to overhype or oversell their product.
They couldn't understand why fans were so crazy about Elden Ring. Elden Ring was attacked because it was full of content and had more gameplay options than anything else on the market. It was also attacked because it didn't hold players' hands and gave more content than Western devs were used to delivering. Basically, they hated Elden Ring because it was a true video game that cared about its consumers. Which is something sadly a ton of Western games these days regretfully just can't understand. And like that game, Baldur's Gate 3 is in similar hot water amongst the creative types. According to GameWorldObserver.com with their article titled, "Why Devs Consider Baldur's Gate 3 Anomaly Not New Standard for RPG Genre, It's Rockstar Level Nonsense for Scope." A lot of this discourse started where an indie game developer named Xavier Nelson Jr. tweeted that BG3's success will only harm the future releases of other games due to its quality. He said things such as, "Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3. But I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or a raise standard to RPGs going forward. This is not..."
Part of me has, like, it's very confusing for me, and I don't entirely understand it, but it should raise the bar. And again, I think people miss the mark of the low standard bar that I kind of highlighted earlier. There's also this, like, non-separation. A game studio is a game studio. It's all the developers, right? But the current model is, I think, game developers who work for the studios that are passionate and want to make a real passion product gamer experience, who then have to meet the demands of a marketing team and a sales team, and that marketing and sales team has enough influence over the entire studio or company to change the direction that the devs do things, and it makes it harder for the devs to develop this complete project the way it should be, because there's two aspects. There's the business side of a studio and the creative side of the studio. And I think the creative side would always want to make a game like Baldur's Gate 3, but they have to appease the business side of the studio to add the extra things that gamers have a problem with in modern society. I think this Baldur's Gate 3 should set a new standard, and it would be great if game studios took note of this and realized that if we went back to focusing on the game, the money will follow the good game, and we can get rid of the additional stuff that we're trying to monetize to increase profits because our sales in general go up, right? That would be the hope that a game like this develops to the gaming market, but
not a new baseline for RPGs.
Studios are going to fight
this
that.
Is an anomaly. Trying to do the same thing in the same way, especially without the same advantages, could kill an entire group of studios. So please celebrate the achievement represented by Baldur's Gate 3. It looks like a massive amount of effort is about to pay off in a big way for one of the brightest voices in the medium. But if you shout that every RPG should be like this going forward, you have no excuse. You've not just missed the point, you've created the expectations and conditions to ensure your favorite creators may never be able to give you the thing you love ever again. Then you have other game devs like James Berg, who also said things about Baldur's Gate 3. I would not be surprised if this was more dev effort than the next 2 or 3 games in the genre combined. It's rockstar level nonsense for scope. Only a few studio groups could even try this. I cannot wait to play, but this kind of effort likely won't be replicated this decade. While I understand BG3's success and scope would make an indie studio shudder, since there's no way they can achieve that level of sheer content, I think people like Xavier and James are also kind of what's wrong with Western gaming lately as well. I don't need to tell you that currently right now, there's...
But I think a counterpoint here would be the fact that, like, I think he's right. I don't think the level for size and scope of the game gets replicated for a while. Baldur's Gate 3 took a long time to develop. But that being said, you can put that effort on a smaller scope game and still achieve the same metrics, right? I think a lot of people are looking at it wrong, and it's part of this whole, like, I always compare this game to this game to this game. Every game in the genre gets compared to each other instead of standalone. Okay, so like, let's say a smaller studio can't meet the size. Does that mean they can't meet the graphics, mechanics, and enjoyability? No. So like, effort for these studios should be, what can you put in to give the most enjoyable experience, regardless of how big that experience is, versus saying that like, we can't ever meet this standard again. And to be clear, I don't want another Baldur's Gate 3 to come out next year, right? I want a game to be different so that it captures me in a different way. I think that the standards that people are talking about aren't the ones that are important. Is it engaging? Is it new and exciting? Is it fun to play? Those are what the standards should be, not is it big enough? Does it look pretty enough? And is there X number hours of content? It's the engagement that and playability that's important, not the size and hours of content. And that's the mark that I think a lot of them are missing, because they're all talking about, we can't match this scale of an event, whereas it's not about the scale, it's about the enjoyment. And the conversation's kind of skewed because developers are looking at the wrong points to take away from why Baldur's Gate is being successful now.
There's a lot of garbage coming out of Western studios. There's far too many live service games with microtransactions, battle passes, or games launching that barely even
everywhere.
work and constantly crash. Just look at Star Wars Jedi Survivor when that released on PC. The game was a mess. And it had the backing of a massive game company and Disney,
It was a
and it was
mess.
based on one of the largest IPs in the world. Yet even then, PC players were given a broken game and expected to pay full price to play it anyway.
And that's my problem about being a beta tester. Now, I waited, what was it, like a month and a half, 2 months to play the game. And I played it. I really enjoyed it. It had good content. It had a good story. The game was a good game after they fixed it. I'm not a beta tester, though. I shouldn't have had to go through the game crashing experience to get the good game experience. And that's the problem. Star Wars Survivor had everything that a game needed to have to be a good game, but they launched it in a bad state and asked me to be the beta tester to figure out what was wrong with the game so that they could fix it a month later. That's a problem that needs to be addressed. And hopefully studios are getting this mentality and an idea down that it is better to delay to give me a game that works. Because if you delay 6 months but the game works perfectly, no one's going to be mad about it. If you don't delay and the game launches and you have to spend 6 months fixing it, people are going to remember that and they're going to be mad and they're going to walk away quickly. That's the point.
I think we can all agree that when it comes to modern gaming, for the most part, when you buy a game on release, there's a really good chance you're basically buying a game to be a beta tester. Of course, there are some games that release that both work well and have the polish that players expect for the money that they spend. Final Fantasy XVI is a great example of this, alongside Elden Ring and BG3. These games all actually deliver on what they promise, and in my opinion, they also justify their price tags. But there's also this weird mantra when it comes to modern video games, which is that it seems like game devs purposely try to not over-deliver, because they don't want to give more content or polish than they think that they need to. I think the real reason why devs have unanimously agreed on this bizarre don't over-deliver tactic is because it creates a baseline to give thousands of devs room to release games of varying quality that either work fine or not at all at release. And this is just how things are, apparently. But
I fundamentally disagree with that mentality. I don't think there's a single developer out there that says we're going to hamstring ourselves by releasing a product that's slightly below what the expectation is in order to protect the industry so that we have an excuse moving forward as a group. I don't think that's a developer mentality. This goes back to the business side, creative side. I think the business side doesn't want to explain delays, and they push and push to meet deadlines regardless of the creative side says it's ready or not. I think the developers and the creative side of studios want to meet the expectations of a well-working game. But I think studios do not want to explain why they're having delays because it can hurt the reputation or brand of the game before it even launches. And that is a fight that's happening internally in studios. But I refuse to accept that studios are just saying, look, we're going to put out a baseline now so that, you know, we can fix it later. And the industry standard is this. And if we keep doing it, we can keep those expectations low and we don't hurt each other. Because I don't think that that's a good business mentality, is if we continue to push out medium ranked products that we improve over time, that industry standard can help protect us in the future. That's a bad mentality for any company to have. It's just a conflict happening within the studios.
Personally believe that this mentality is encouraged because it allows game studios to deliver less content while still reaping the rewards. A great example of this actually is the whole Destiny 2 controversy right now. In case you don't know about that, Bungie released a state of the game where they basically confirmed that they were all but dropping core game modes, and would no longer be adding new armor sets to the game every season because of low adoption rates, according to Bungie. But fans quickly pointed out that the armor that has low adoption rates usually looks like ass, since all the actual good sets and weapon skins are all placed behind Eververse, which is Destiny 2's microtransaction store. Bungie also said that making games is hard and players should be more realistic with their expectations. They also stated during a games developer conference that over-delivering can hurt your game and set patterns that make future content unable to deliver. Bungie even believes previous releases like the Witch Queen expansion to be an example of over-delivering. Yet players loved that expansion because it not only added new game mechanics, it had a good raid and an excellent story. It actually felt worth the money that you spent on it. Then you fast forward to this year's release with Lightfall, and the community's nuclear reaction to it was the opposite of Witch Queen.
Yes. So there's that. But in a live service game, and again, you can't compare Baldur's Gate to a live service game because they're completely different mentalities. But in a live service game, obviously, you're going to have seasons that hit and seasons that flop. And that's a problem with the creative side of a live service game, is that you have to constantly deliver storyline after storyline, content after content, and you have to keep it moving forward. And if you look at any franchise in history across entertainment, you're going to have diehard fans. Star Wars. First three are the best three ever. The next three in the trilogy, the 1 through 3, total garbage, and the last 3 total garbage. But like, there's a group that likes this one, and there's a group that like. So like, this is where that subjectiveness comes in. And I'm not gonna excuse the fact that there may be less content, and the like not adding new armor thing is kind of BS, because realistically it's just a play to force people into the microtransaction hell of buying the good armor, and that game kind of developed that situation. But again, on the creative side, not every expansion is going to meet everyone's expectations, and it's always going to be a problem because they could follow this one up with another expansion that people love. Look at World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft had the same ups and downs between this expansion good, this expansion bad, this expansion good, this expansion bad, and it goes back and forth depending on, like, obviously they have a goal and they want to deliver good content, but it's hard to be S tier every time when you're putting out so many expansions.
Lightfall felt pointless, rushed, had a terrible story and campaign, and besides a new subclass, it's largely considered a blight on Destiny's history. But to Bungie, Lightfall falls in line with what fans should expect. But the problem here is that Lightfall has less content than Witch Queen, but it was also sold for a higher price than Witch Queen as well. Meaning Bungie effectively gave their player base less content of a much lower quality and made more money in the end. It's a win for the studio financially, but Bungie instead paid the price with a loss of credibility, player satisfaction, and now with this state of the game nonsense,
that's a fair
the community's faith in Bungie is at an all-time low now.
I mean,
but in terms of what devs...
Inflation comes into, like, the economy of everything comes into play when you're talking about prices, but realistically, games should be a certain amount and expansions should be a certain amount, and developers are going to continue to test the waters as development cycles get more expensive based on salaries and everything like that. Again, this is the business side fighting with the creative side, right? But by and large, you should expect expansions should be kind of like a steady plateau, and like this should add X dollar amount, and it comes down to like dollars versus hours, and jacking up the price during an expansion from the last expansion should include more content, but it's just, I don't know. It's, again, studio versus creative side, right? You can't guarantee that you're going to get certain numbers of hours out of every expansion, but the studio does have to get their return on investment for the development cycle. So if all the salaries are going up or all the wages are going up because of the outside their control economy, then obviously they're going to have to charge a little bit more. And unfortunately, the players have that problem, right? They have to deal with the consequences of everything happening in the business side of the studio.
Like Xavier and James said previously, what Bungie did by under-delivering is seen as good in their eyes, yet it's opposite for the paying customer. It honestly seems like consumers and devs are at a crossroads where both parties have wildly different expectations of the other. And with
That's
Baldur's
extremely
Gate 3's
fair.
massive release with its over-delivering and sheer amount of content and quality, it's the exact opposite of Destiny's Lightfall. Fans are happy to buy BG3 because it respects their time and money and doesn't constantly ask players to buy nonsense like weapon
100%
skins
accurate.
or armor constantly. But to devs, they hate it because it doesn't fit into this new age model of what games should be. I also find it interesting that when Destiny releases a crap expansion, a lot of these devs are silent. But whenever a game actually meets audience expectations like Elden Ring or BG3, they unanimously assemble to tear these games down. The simple truth is that devs don't want Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3 to become the norm because they don't want the norm to become over-delivering. But the truth is that today's over-delivering was 10 or 20 years ago's industry standard. It's likely why we haven't seen a new Elder Scrolls in forever, because a game like Skyrim, if it were released today as a brand new game, in terms of scope, content, story, and so on, these same devs would attack it because it would be over-delivering in their words. Other devs like Spellforces 3's Rebecca Harwick said,
"There's this like rose-colored glasses, right? Everyone looks back at games in the past, and like games in the past didn't have any problems, right? This wasn't an issue 10 years ago. But like Grand Theft Autos all had bugs in them. Like, don't get me wrong, they were like really good games. They were really enjoyable. They had bugs in them. Yes, before the age of internet patching, games had to ship in a complete state. However, they did have bugs that could never be fixed unless they like fixed it and released later disc for people who bought it in the future, but not for the people that already had it. So like bugs were there. There was some games that came out that were kind of close to unplayable. Like this whole thing that like 10 to 15 years ago, this problem never existed isn't true. We just remember games being complete because they couldn't be fixed. And that's just kind of the way it is, you know? I get the point. I really do. I want games to be complete and playable on day one. But at the same time, I think people remember fondly the games that they remember fondly, and they forget the bad experiences in gaming they had 15 years ago.
This whole thread, you can't be appalled about how much big games cost to make, and make those lavish productions the standard by which all games are judged. I hope Baldur's Gate 3 is a generous once-in-lifetime RPG. I hope no one expects a 10, 20, 40 person team to make one. But I think these devs are taking the wrong lessons from Baldur's Gate and Elden Ring. We understand that not every game will be utterly massive like the Lands Between. But I think more so than anything, players want games to have quality be the utmost importance to devs. Elden Ring alone has more combat and weapon options than multiple AAA games combined. Baldur's Gate 3 has more cutscenes and replayability than the greatest of roguelikes. They don't want these games to become the norm because if they do, it'll expose their games for being shitty and greedy, and that's what this is all about. They don't want players to expect actual quality.
You can call them shitty and greedy all you want. And it is fair because I think there's a certain level of that within the industry. However, people play them. People buy them. People enjoy them. And people spend a lot of time in them. So you can't be completely mad at only the studios for doing this stuff when the consumer keeps giving them a reason to do the stuff. And that's not going to change. People like what they like and people play what they want to play, and they put up with what they're willing to put up with. That's the real industry standard, is consumers and gamers complain about it nonstop till we're blue in the face, but keep going back. I am going to keep going back. Not going to spend money on microtransactions and stuff like that because I just don't. But I keep going back because I enjoy the experience despite its downsides or downfalls, whatever. As long as that exists, it's going to keep going that way. Can games be better? Yes. Can we have a discussion about how they deliver better products? Absolutely. But you can't call them all shit or whatever because they do these things when all the games do them and people keep playing all the games. He made a huge point about everything Destiny did, and they lost some fan base, but people are still logging into the game and people are still playing the game. So the point is only for a select few that talk the loudest about how bad modern gaming is, right? Because let's be realistic and honest about how reviews go. The fact of the matter is someone is infinitely more likely to leave a bad review than a good review. If I enjoyed my experience, I will walk away enjoying my experience. If I have a bad experience, that's what motivates me to point out the bad experience. Reviews in general will always be skewed towards people who didn't enjoy things because your average person isn't going to leave a review on something that they enjoyed or had a moderately good experience with. But if someone has a really bad experience, they're going to want to write it down and they're going to want to put it out. That's just human nature.
Quality games because it means these devs have to do more than the bare minimum when it comes to making them. And the Rockstar level nonsense line is also tone deaf. since yet again, devs are hating on games that are far more profitable and quality made than their own. Sure, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a cash cow full of microtransactions, but at least at its core, I think people will agree that it's a quality product. It looks great, it has a huge world with tons of content, and the physics and everything within it work both to great and hilarious effect. They're tearing down Baldur's Gate 3 because it proves that games can still be great and profitable. But BG3 is also an anomaly in today's world because today's games are largely unfinished, unplayable messes at release. Or they underdeliver on purpose while charging more like Destiny does. And it seems like Larian is already in the crosshairs of the mega corpos since Larian CEO Sven Vick confirms that Microsoft has approached them about buying the entire company. But Sven assures fans Larian will stay independent, saying, "I'm getting older, but I'm certainly not done yet. The strength of this company is that I'm very invested in the gameplay, and I also make the ultimate decisions. We can do things in service of the games we're making." With Sven clarifying that his problem with mega corpos is that profit is always more important than gameplay or quality, and that Baldur's Gate 3's reception is proof that Larian cares about its players and their reputation far more than just milking them for eternity. And really, how many game devs these days can you really say have that same mentality? Chasing the bag seems to be all these
realistically, because let's be honest about this point too. He's really talking about AAA studios. He's not talking about the larger, broader game development organization, right? Because like indie games right now are doing very well because indie games do this because they care about this. They're not to the point where the business side has taken over the development and creative side. Realistically, this argument only stands up against AAA studios, and AAA studios just happen to be the ones that get the most traction and attention because it's really hard for an indie studio to get the eyes that they need to gain traction and move forward with their game. They're not delivering games to this scale most times. And that's just because of their size, development, and like budget. But the argument it really is against AAA studios. It's not the game development category as a whole, because there's more small studios doing stuff like this to a much smaller scale than there are AAA studios making games. It's just the AAA studios making games get the most money because they get the most sales because they get the most attention.
AAA studios do these days. Besides Bungie milking their player base and then crying saying making games is too hard, you have BioWare, who used to be like Larian until they stopped making games like Mass Effect, and decided it was time for the studio to make a live service game, which is how Anthem came to be. This cultural and total shift in modern gaming has honestly ruined a lot of these companies. I wouldn't be surprised if the original
Anthem probably could have had a chance if they delayed a little bit longer and worked on a couple more details, maybe. But it really underdelivered, I guess. And that's that marketing and like expectation bar, right? They set the bar too high and they kind of shot themselves in the foot.
Trilogy by today's standards is also over-delivering in modern game devs' eyes as well. It seems like every great game that actually tries to be a fun game first is more a problem than the tsunami of free-to-play nonsense out there. They simply do not want quality and sheer quantity of content to be the norm. They want to gaslight people and make them feel sorry for the devs while also charging insane prices for games that secretly make every paying customer into a beta tester. To be real with you,
and it's hard to tell right now on some of this point when you're talking about like sheer scale and content and all of that, but it's hard to tell where it's going to fall in the near future, because let's not forget that Starfield is still right on the horizon and GTA 6 is still sometime next year, early, hopefully, maybe, which is supposed to be this. So like there are games in development that are supposed to follow this Baldur's Gate 3 style of delivery as far as content, size, scope, playability, all of that. But they're just not out yet. They're still in development. So it's hard to say that like all of this is dead and Baldur's Gate 3 is the only one trying something this size. I mean, Elden Ring came out last year. You're going to have a game or two or a couple games a year that do this size, scope, and content, right? Like, a lot of people didn't like Dying Light 2, but I loved Dying Light 2, and it had the size, scope, all of that. Elden Ring came out. Zelda came out. There are still games that meet this kind of size, scope, content expectations sprinkled throughout the year. It's just there's a lot of other games that come out too that don't meet those expectations, that are your free-to-play microtransaction hell style games. So, like, you're getting a mix of things. It's just people kind of like pick and choose what game meets their expectation for what content, right?
It's just so tiring. Larian warms my heart since when you look at whether Baldur's Gate 3 has any microtransactions, on the official store it says, "There are no in-game purchases in our game. We believe in providing a complete and immersive gaming experience without the need for additional purchases.
And good
Enjoy
for
the
them.
game to its fullest without any
that.
additional costs or microtransactions." Like, what the hell, right? This should be the standard going forward, but it isn't.
It depends on the
that
game.
In 2023, there's a big budget AAA RPG game.
I want to be clear on it depends on the game thing, right? Because if you have a seasonal game, Diablo 4, that game needs to make money in between seasons. They have to, otherwise season 4 doesn't come out, right? If they don't make money in season 2, because the way Diablo 4 has it set up, they have 2 season teams that leapfrog each other. So if season 1 doesn't make money, season 3 can never be made, because they'll run out of money to develop season 3. If season 2 doesn't make money, season 4 will never be made. And a lot of games work like that in the seasonal live service world. So they have to have some form of making money in between. Destiny does it through expansions and microtransactions. So you pay for an expansion and you can buy better armor in the studio. Do a lot of them push it to the limits and make it too much? Yeah, probably, but it has to exist for the live service to continue to move forward. Baldur's Gate 3 is not a live service game. They don't need to make content to deliver season 2 or 3. They might work on a DLC, but the game itself will make money to fund DLC if that's the way they want to go with it. That's kind of a different model. So I don't hate microtransactions. I understand why they exist. But my biggest complaint with microtransactions will always be, does it affect gameplay? If a microtransaction does not improve gameplay or change a character's skill base, making them stronger, then who cares? If it's cosmetic, it means nothing and you don't have to partake in that system if it's cosmetic. Because if you want to look good, you can look good. That's up to you. But if it's cosmetic and it doesn't affect the gameplay, you don't have to partake in it. But if all of a sudden I'm buying something that has the best stats in the game, now I have a problem because it's pay to win. Or if I can't do certain campaigns and dungeons because I can't partake in that system, that is a problem. And even Diablo 4 has their season battle passes, but those are only cosmetic bonuses, right? And there's one that lets you like get more XP for your battle pass. But at the end of the day, you can play season 1 without spending a dime in Diablo 4, and you can get all of the standard game cosmetics in the game, and nothing you buy in the game makes you a stronger player, changes the game experience. And that is perfectly fine. And I understand why that exists, because they have to continue to fund future projects and seasons. There's not a problem with that. These companies do have to make money to continue development cycles if it's live action. And even for Baldur's Gate 3, they're not doing any microtransactions, but the sale of this game would be able to fund the DLC, at which point they should, if they do make DLC, they should charge for it, because obviously it costs them development money. And when they charge for the DLC, the sales of that DLC could fund another one if that's the direction they want to go. It's the same idea. It's just without live service, you're not flipping that cycle as fast.
That not only respects its players, but also their wallets. This game honestly doesn't feel real, so it's no wonder why other devs hate it. And it's incredibly eye-opening when you place BG3 up against other huge RPGs this year like Diablo 4, which not only has a premium battle pass, but also an entire online store full of sets that cost as much as entire video games. Diablo 4 also got into trouble when the first season of that game went live because the devs on purpose placed the button to buy their premium battle pass directly where players access the map, with the pass being bought without any confirmation. So likely thousands of players of Diablo 4 mistakenly bought the battle pass by accident, and no
not
Blizzard
exactly how that happened. That's not exactly how that happened. That was a little bit dishonest in the description of how it works, but he's not wrong. The button to buy the season pass was in the season page, and it was just a red button that said activate pass or activate season pass, right? So there was a button for your metrics on what I need to complete the season quest, then the button to purchase, and then the battle pass underneath all of that. People accidentally hit that button and it did a no confirmation purchase, which has been fixed. And that is deceptive in a certain way, but it wasn't something that like I open up my map and I accidentally bought the season pass. There were accidents because there was no confirmation to the purchase, and I understand that argument, but it wasn't as straightforward as something I have to do in the game. I hit the button and all of a sudden I bought it and I never knew. There's a nuanced argument there, and I've already gone over the entirety of Diablo 4's microtransaction hell. I think they are overcharging, but that's their decision, not mine, and none of it's necessary anyway.
Will not refund those who did it. Don't you just love these modern gaming companies? And the disrespect of modern gaming doesn't even end there, since Red Dead Redemption just got an official release on Switch and PS4. The game is $50 American at launch, and oh, by the way, this is a re-release. That's all it is, a re-release.
This one is
version
bad.
Of Red Dead is the exact same game.
At least the GTA trilogy, it was a remake, and they updated everything in it. Like, just giving me the old game on a new console that I have to buy again, absolute trash. That was a big L decision from Rockstar. I hate what they did with Red Dead Redemption here. I don't understand how this was like a viable strategy for them. If they had remade it and put it in a new engine to update the graphics and everything, that would have been okay. Still a bit steep at $50, but it is what it is at that point. But with this, you're getting nothing, no new content. The graphics aren't even new. Nothing is changed or developed. They just made a port, and it's kind of lazy, really.
Game back on the Xbox 360 and PS3. There's no visual enhancements, no 60 FPS, or added bells and whistles. Rockstar literally just released the same game as it was over 10 years ago for almost the same price as Baldur's Gate 3 at launch. So when I say that these companies and their studios don't value their customers, I truly do mean it. They do not care about you at all. You are just a consumer born to pay for stuff until you die in their eyes. And that is why Baldur's Gate 3 is so hated by these modern game developers. Because it could have easily been designed to fleece its audience with predatory microtransactions or pay-to-win nonsense. And the user reviews speak for themselves. I mean, come on, just read any one of these for confirmation.
And I mean,
this one especially, which says
on my point earlier, he showed all of this, right? I made the point earlier about why people leave reviews. It does speak volumes when people are leaving that many good reviews, just based on the way people tend to review things in general, right? If people are overwhelmingly positive in reviews, that says a lot more than being somewhat positive or negative. Because it's easy to leave a bad review. People it almost feels like going out of your way to leave a good review, right?
From Software are the only two studios that I trust. I agree with Raiden here as well. There's not many devs I would say I openly trust anymore when it comes to them delivering quality products. And the list of studios gets smaller every year, the more predatory and greedy they become. So if you're playing Baldur's Gate 3, I hope you enjoy it. I hope people continue to reward and play games that actually genuinely are designed to be the best experience possible. And if you want another game I think that falls in line with games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring in terms of quality and content, maybe give Chained Echoes a look sometime. It's cheap and has more content and love put into it than most AAA RPGs. I'm not even kidding. But these games should not be anomalies but the standard, so please keep playing, push back, and let these studios know their lazy attempts at normalizing shit games will not stand. Vote with your wallet, friends.
Definitely going to give this one a like. You know what? He made some really good points, but like ultimately, I also feel to a certain degree that he's being overly harsh to the industry as a whole, right? That's something that I think he kind of missed the point on. Is he is overly harsh to the industry. Not that the industry doesn't deserve scrutiny, and not that they can't deliver better products. Not to say any of that, but I think that sometimes we exaggerate the actual state of things and ignore other things that may support not being exaggerated, right? Starfield has yet to hit, and we'll see how that goes. But like, there have been games in the past couple of years, aside from Elden Ring, that have delivered this experience. Final Fantasy, Zelda. I had a great time in Dying Light 2 and Dead Island 2, right? So there are games that are delivering these experiences for players, just maybe not to the scale that Baldur's Gate did, and it doesn't catch the whole audience. It just depends on like if you play a large variety of games, if you're going to find that experience throughout the industry, right? Even like I started playing The Expanse, and the first chapter of The Expanse played absolutely perfectly. I had no issues with it. It's not a high action game, but it looked good. It looked immersive. Like I enjoyed being in that world because I enjoyed the television series as well. I could visualize it and walk around that world. It looked good and everything played smoothly, even though it's just largely a choose your own adventure type gaming experience. I don't know. The games are out there that deliver on this, and there are definitely games that deliver on the predatory experiences as well. And there's more of a mix of what's going on than I think he gave credit to, but overall it was a good video and he made some good points. I dropped the link. It'll be down in the comments. Make sure be down in the description. Make sure you guys check out the original video, give it a like. It was a good watch, and I appreciated his perspective. And subscribe, do this stuff. You want all that? All of that. Hey there, it's Skeg Broggy. Thanks for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and follow me here on Twitch for more awesome content. Link is in the description.